Derek's courage faltered greatly by the time they got to the porch. They had only observed the house from a distance before. Now they were up close and personal. This didn't seem like such a good idea. A voice inside him screamed a wailing warning. He didn't listen. No, he couldn't. Not now that he made such a big show of wanting to find something interesting in this boring neck of the woods. Besides, he and his friends have had their ears talked off for years about the tales of Greywood. What have they had to show for it? Nothing. Until now, anyway. An abandoned house in the woods. Will Derek take it? You bet he will. Derek clenched his fists, refusing to look back. Then, with suddenness, he strode forward through the doorway. He knew standing on the outside that it was much too dark in that opening. They should have been able to see inside, yet he ignored the warning signs. He ignored the voice in his head. He wanted adventure, and by everything that's fun, he's going to get it. He stumbled as he stepped through. His body felt something change, and it was more than the air temperature. It felt like he had gone somewhere far away, yet he knew he only took one step. It was a disconcerting feeling, to say the least. He soon forgot the sensation when one by one his friends came through. Kyle, then Amber, then Ryan. Ryan looked the least enthusiastic, and Amber appeared the least impressed. She looked around with a raised eyebrow. "Am I crazy, or is this not the same house?" she said. They all looked around. Derek hitched his breath. Amber was right. The house was in pristine condition. Everything was neat and tidy. It could have been moved into just yesterday, if all the unpacking had been done by then. Behind them, the door that did not exist a moment before slammed shut with a bang. Ryan and Kyle screamed. Amber jumped and twisted, ready to swing her stick at the first thing that moved. Derek felt the hairs on his neck raise. His flesh tightened to the point of pain. "That was freaky," Kyle said. Ryan gave him an incredulous look. "Freaky," he said, his voice cracking. "Are you brain dead? There was no door a minute ago." Kyle waved his hands, angry. "Well, excuse me, Captain Obvious. I'm just trying to lighten the mood," he said. "Humor. Ever heard of it?" "There's nothing humorous about this," Ryan said. "We need to get out of here." "Are you admitting that this is paranormal?" Amber said. Those words made everyone pause. Derek knew that it was what everyone was thinking. It was just like Amber to come right out and say things. They all looked at Ryan. He stammered. He tried to form words, but he was tongue-tied. He might have eventually said something, but he got to because, from down the hallway, a creaking scream cut through the air like a blade. They all turned to look down the darkened corridor. A door pushed open, the hinges, creating the wailing whine of rusted metal. Derek thought this was strange. The house seemed so well preserved, yet the hinges were that bad off. He didn't have time to contemplate this as the red glowing mist appeared the other side of the doorway. It poured into the hall, and it rolled towards them. Derek let out a shriek as Amber strode past him. She raised the stick up and was about to take a swing when he rushed up and grabbed her. "Amber, don't," Derek said. "We don't know what that is." She looked at him, taking her wrist back. "It's in our way," she said. "What else are we supposed to do?" Just then, a creaking moan rose up from inside the room of the open door. The house shuddered around them. "Guys, what was that?" Kyle said. "It's just the wind," Ryan said, not sounding convinced at all. The moan came again, and the house trembled so hard it made Derek's teeth clatter together. The red mist was coming closer. "What do we do?" Kyle said, looking to Derek. He was always looking to him. The guy couldn't seem to put on his own pants unless Derek told him which leg went first. At least, Derek felt this way a lot of the time. The moan came again. The house seemed to pulse with the sound. It moved with it, almost as if it was alive. Derek thought that whatever was making that sound had been here a long time, alone in this house. All that time, it must be hungry, and Derek was sure that him and his friends would do just fine for its next, long overdue meal. With that terrible thought crossing his mind, he thought of only one thing to do. "Run!" he said, retreating into the kitchen. The others followed him. Behind them, the red mist surged forward, as if invigorated by its fleeing prey. "Run where?" Ryan said. Derek could have punched him right then. Instead, he said, "We got to hide." As another creaking howl crept up behind them, they all thought that was a pretty grand idea. For now, the kitchen led to a parlor. There was nowhere good to hide. Just outside in the hallway, there was a staircase going up. Before he could second-guess himself, Derek was taking the stairs, 2 at a time. The others followed him. When they made it to the landing, they looked around. Derek was not the only one to notice that something was off. To put it in simple terms, the upstairs was enormous. It had a vaulted ceiling that stretched upwards and disappeared from sight. A long hall with columns running down the sides opened in front of them. Lanterns hung in the air from unseen chains. Derek got the sense that this was a different place entirely. Ryan cried out, "Guys, it's coming!" he said. The red mist touched the bottom stair. Now it started to climb. Derek had the sinking feeling that no matter where they went, it would always know where to go. He didn't dare voice that thought, however. "Let's go down here," he said, waving them onwards. If they had any misgivings, they didn't share as they followed him. Derek ran between the columns, looking to and fro, looking for anything that could be an exit. An exit could mean escape. An escape meant hope, and they needed that like crazy right then. It was Kyle who saw the doorway. It was half hidden in shadow. The crew veered to the side, running as fast as they could towards the open passageway. It was dark, and Derek imagined that something horrible waited inside, but the red mist was still coming. It seemed to be gaining speed. It moved across the floor, an inexorable and silent shroud. Amber reached the doorway first. She was something of a natural runner and had the boys beat by a few paces. She waved at them, yelling at them to get a move on. She stopped mid-wave, and her eyes suddenly got huge. Her hands went to her mouth, and she uttered a strangled scream. The boys finally caught up, panting at the doorway. They all looked. Screams bubbled up in their throats. None of them had a chance. Amber tugged at all of their collars almost at once. She yanked hard and sent them stumbling backwards into the passage. Then, even though they were exhausted and out of breath, they ran. Ryan finally collapsed. Derek skidded to a stop and shouted for the others. They turned back while Derek got his hands under Ryan's armpits. "Get up," Derek said. "We have to keep moving." Ryan could barely respond as he gasped for air like a fish out of water. "I can't," he said between breaths. "I feel like I'm dying." Derek thought they all looked the same, tired and scared. Both things could kill you. He knew that from his dad. "Two things can kill a man as surely as they'll keep him alive," he would say, working and fearing. Derek would nod his head and say, "Yes, sir." But he didn't really get it. Now he was a little bit closer to understanding it in his own way, though he is sure that his dad might not have meant those words in the context of his current situation. Then again, they were in Greywood. It had only been stories. Derek now understood that he could never say that again. That brought up the troubling question: how many of them were more than just creepy tales? Derek managed to get Ryan back up on his feet and said, "Move!" Raya hung on to Derek for support. They were moving, but their pace had slowed down to a crawl. "Dude, you're as slow as my dad," Kyle said, casting nervous looks back. So far, they had left the red mist behind. "Pick it up." "I'm trying," Ryan said, his pride pricked. I don't spend all day goofing off like you guys. My parents make me study a lot. Maybe you should study the benefits of running a little more, Kyle said. It's a good way to increase your chances of survival. Ryan gave him a rueful grin. Yeah, point taken, he said, and nodded towards a dim light that was coming from up ahead. Where are we going? I'm going to go ahead and check it out, Amber said. No, wait, Derek said. It was already too late. Amber took off like a shot and disappeared around the corner. They heard her quick footsteps echo down the hall. Eventually, they heard nothing at all. Derek counted the seconds until they heard her footfalls again. There was only the sound of their breathing. He gritted his teeth, annoyed. Wasn't she the one who suggested they stick together? Though he knew it wasn't a bad idea to check up ahead, he just hated how he wasn't able to do it. He should be taking the lead here. This had all been his idea in the first place. They were all lost in thought when a long moan came from behind them. There was no shaking of the walls and floor, but the fear still hit Derek like a freight truck. He knew it was following. There was no question. Can you run yet? Derek said. Ryan shook his head. Can you walk on your own at least? Kyle shot him a disgusted look. Ryan gave a sheepish nod. Derek was relieved to have the bigger boy's weight off of him. We should pick up the pace, Kyle said. As if in answer, a monstrous creaking groan assaulted their ears. Like now. Derek looked at Ryan. He only managed to give him a weak nod in return. I'll try, he said in a dry voice. Okay, Derek said as another rumbling growl sounded in the air. We need to find Amber. Are you guys still back there? Amber said, appearing around the corner. She's panting. Get your butts moving. I found something. I found something turned out to be the biggest understatement of the year. Maybe of the whole decade. Amber led us down the hallway that was progressively getting narrower. Eventually, it became so tight that they had to sidle sideways and crouch a little. Kyle was starting to panic, and it showed in his voice. Amber, he said. How much further? Just a little bit, she said. Are you getting scared? Kyle didn't answer. He didn't need to. No one said anything else as they went through the grim darkness. Yet Derek marveled that it wasn't pitch black as it should have been. There was no source of light that he could see. The air was dim, seemingly all on its own. He focused on his breathing, a trick his mom taught him when he started seeing his red friend, Anger. He saw him a lot. It turns out that breathing is Anger's better cousin. Breathing is chill and cool. The best answer for anger. Apparently, breathing is helpful in a lot of ways, like keeping calm in a tight, dark place, and you feel like you can't breathe. We're here, Amber said. Behind them, a distant, creaking moan followed them. Derek was grateful that it was far off. There were some forks in the passageway. He prayed that whatever was following them took another way. He didn't quite dare have too much faith in that hope, though. The passage finally opened. Not only did it open, but it actually spit them out into fresh air. The sky loomed above them. Stars twinkled and a pale moon rose up, huge in its celestial splendor. Derek looked at Amber. We're out, he said, relief flooding him with such completeness that he suddenly felt woozy and heavy. He could have curled up right there on the grass and passed out. Ryan actually did collapse on the ground. He was wheezing. His eyes threatened to bulge right out of their sockets. Kyle wandered a little ahead of them towards the line of trees, looking into their shadows. Hey, I see something out there, he said, peering. There's something just over there. The others followed his pointing finger. Sure enough, there was a twinkling light further into the woods. Derek looked behind them. The dark mouth of the passage seemed menacing. No way was he going back in there. Besides, they couldn't hear the thing that was chasing them before anymore. That had to be a good sign. Before them was a cabin. Warm firelight glowed through the windows. They could see a family inside. 2 children, a boy and a girl, and their parents. They were gathered at the dining table where a delicious feast steamed and glistened. The meats were succulent, dripping with fat. Vegetables were crisp and fresh. Bread rolls made aromatic clouds in the air. Derek salivated. With the constant fear-fueled flight, he didn't realize how hungry he was. He could see from the expressions of his companions that they had similar thoughts. Ryan started forward. Amber grabbed his wrist and stopped him. He looked at her, angry. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice almost feral. "Let go of me." Amber refused. "Something isn't right," she said. Kyle nodded in agreement. "You guys hear that?" he said. At first, no one caught on, but then the light clicked on all at once. "It's silent," Derek said. Kyle tipped his head and whisked an imaginary hat into the air in a grand gesture. "And the crowd goes wild," he said, his tone grim. "Guys, I think we are still in." "But we're outside," Ryan said, his voice almost a whimper. "We can't be inside. Red mist doesn't glow. Well, actually, it shouldn't even exist. A house can't be burnt only on the outside. Monsters aren't real. The woods should never, ever be this quiet." Derek wanted to say all those things, but he didn't. What good would it do? "So, what do we do?" Kyle said. He was looking at Derek again. Derek fought the urge to scream. "Which leg are you going to put on first? Flip a coin and see why don't you?" Derek took a breath and let it out slowly. Amber was looking at him too. Ryan as well. He liked being the leader when things were fun and there wasn't any danger involved. Now he felt like he had led them all to their deaths. Did he have any right to keep making decisions for the group? He never answered that question. They were all waiting for him, and they were running out of time. He clenched his fists and stood up straight. "I don't think we have a choice," he said. "Let's check it out." Their faces grew pale, but no one said anything. They followed Derek as he walked out into the open. They kept glancing over their shoulders, and their steps were cautious. Eventually, they came to the cabin door. Derek knocked on it 3 times. They heard the scraping of chairs. Footsteps approached until the person was standing on the other side. Then, ever so slowly, the door began to open, and the hinges were as silent as the woods.